Every evening, as the sun slipped behind the distant whispering trees, the villagers would gather beside a river that shimmered like liquid silver under its light. They stood in small groups, their voices soft murmurs that danced on the edges of the current. They spoke not to each other, but to the water, pouring their hopes, their pains, their gratitude, and sometimes even apologies into its glistening surface. For this river wasn't just a source of life and a mirror to the sky. It was sacred because it listened, according to the elders. When you whispered to flowing water, the sky heard you. Though the river was small and unassuming, barely wider than the village elder's hut, it held a magic that drew people to its banks every day. It had been this way since anyone could remember. Its waters tumbled over smooth stones, creating a melody as old as time itself. The stream was narrow and quiet, winding its way through valleys that few dared to climb. The surrounding mountains were shrouded in mist, their peaks heavy with secrets only the clouds knew. Above the river, the mist hovered like breath, waiting for its moment to rise and dance among the stars. The villagers lived in harmony with this river, respecting its power and cherishing its wisdom. Their lives were intertwined with the rhythm of its current, and they knew that its waters held more than just life-giving liquid. It held stories, hopes, and dreams that reached far beyond the trees that lined its banks. The river was more than just water. It was a messenger, a conduit between the earth and the sky, carrying whispers that would otherwise be lost in the wind. For the children born and raised beside its banks, the river was a constant presence in their lives. They were taught from the earliest age that the river was a listener, and its surface was a mirror reflecting the purity of their thoughts. As they grew, they learned that the river didn't judge, it understood. The soothing sound of its current became their confidant, replacing the need for words. The children developed a deep connection with the river, sharing their secrets with its waters and finding solace in its unwavering presence. Each evening they would bring small offerings to the river, such as flowers or leaves, and gently float them on its surface as a symbol of their devotion. As the offerings drifted away, the children whispered their hopes and dreams into the water, believing that the river would carry their wishes to the sky. One day, a young girl named Aaliyah approached the river with a single white flower. She had heard tales of the river's magic from her grandmother, and she couldn't wait to experience it for herself. As she stood beside the water, she closed her eyes and whispered a wish for her sick mother. Then she let the flower float away, watching as it danced on the surface of the current. From that day on, Alina visited the river every day, bringing flowers and whispering her hopes and dreams into its waters. She believed that the river was listening, and she felt a sense of peace, knowing that her worries were being carried away on the current. Over time, Elena's faith in the river grew, and she began to share its magic with the other villagers. Soon, everyone was gathering beside the river each evening, pouring their hearts out to the flowing water. The river was not only a source of magic, it was also a connector to the unseen world. The villagers believed that when someone died, their spirit would travel along the current, joining the whispers of the living and the echoes of the ancestors. To send a message to those who had passed, they would write it on a leaf, then release it onto the river, letting the current carry their words downstream. It was believed that the river would deliver the messages to the spirits, ensuring that their loved ones received their final words. The villagers took this responsibility seriously, carefully choosing their words and making sure that their messages were filled with love and remembrance. As the leaves floated away, they whispered their final goodbyes, knowing that the river would carry their words to those who had passed. In return, the spirits were believed to send signs through the river, guiding and protecting those who followed its path. Some villagers even claimed to have seen fireflies dancing over the surface of the river at night, believing that these tiny lights were the spirits answering their prayers. One evening, an elderly man named Ezra stood beside the river, watching as a single leaf floated past him. He had lived his entire life beside the river, and he had seen countless leaves come and go, each carrying a piece of someone's heart. As he watched the leaf disappear around a bend, he felt a sense of peace, knowing that the river was connecting the living to the unseen, weaving together the past, the present, and the future. When the moon hung heavy in the velvet sky, the villagers held a night of silence beside the river. It was a night set aside for asking questions and receiving answers from the realm of spirits. The air was thick with anticipation as the villagers lined the banks of the river, each holding a stone with a carved symbol. These symbols represented the questions that burned in their hearts, seeking guidance from the spirits that dwelled in the unseen. The night was filled with a profound stillness, broken only by the gentle lapping of the current against the stones. The villagers stood patiently, their eyes fixed on the flowing water, waiting for the answers that the river would bring. Finally, when the moon reached its zenith, it was time to release their questions into the water. One by one, the villagers dropped their stones into the river, sending ripples that danced in the moonlight. Each stone carried a question, a plea for help, or a simple request for guidance. As the stones sank beneath the surface, the villagers whispered their final words, trusting their fates to the river's embrace. The river flowed on, carrying the weightless questions upward towards the unknown. The villagers waited anxiously, their hearts pounding in their chests. Suddenly, the water began to move, surging and churning as if a giant hand had stirred its depths. The villagers gasped, their eyes wide with anticipation. The river had answered. In the flickering glow of the oil lamp hanging outside his hut, Old Man Ezra traced patterns on the mud floor with a stick. His wrinkled face was etched with the stories of a life well lived beside the whispering river. Tonight, however, a shadow seemed to have fallen over him, his gaze distant and troubled. His granddaughter Maya sat beside him, her young eyes mirroring his concern. For weeks now, the river had run still and silent, offering no guidance to those who sought its wisdom. It was as if the very essence of the river had vanished, leaving behind a stagnant pool that reflected the villagers' growing despair. Grandpa Maya whispered, reaching out to touch his hand. "Why is the river silent? Will it ever speak again?" Her voice trembled with worry, echoing the fears that gnawed at the hearts of every villager. Ezra sighed, his old eyes filled with sadness. "I do not know, my child," he replied, his voice raspy with emotion. "But we must have faith. The river has carried our whispers to the sky for generations. Surely it will find its voice again." Together, grandfather and granddaughter stepped out of the hut and walked towards the river. The sight that greeted them was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The usually vibrant current had become sluggish and murky, its surface devoid of the light that danced there before. The river seemed to be weeping, its tears falling silently onto the parched ground. As they stood beside the river, Maya and Ezra closed their eyes, reaching out to feel the energy that had once pulsed through this place. They whispered their hopes and dreams into the still water, praying that the river would hear their pleas. When they opened their eyes, they saw a faint glimmer in the distance. It was the faintest of lights, yet to them it shone brighter than 1,000 suns. Hand in hand, they walked towards the light, their hearts pounding in their chests. As they approached, the light grew stronger, revealing a small patch of land where the river flowed into a hidden cave. Inside the cave, they found a group of villagers gathered around a small fire, their faces illuminated by its flickering light. "The river has spoken," one of the villagers exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "She has shown us the way." As the villagers emerged from the cave, they carried with them a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The river had guided them to this moment, bringing them together to heal the wounds that had separated them. The journey to the cave had been arduous, but it had brought them closer together, reminding them of the bonds that united them. Hand in hand, they walked back to their village, their steps lighter and their hearts full of gratitude. The river had spoken, and they had listened. Now it was up to them to follow its guidance and heal the wounds that had torn their community apart. The path ahead was uncertain, but they knew that they were not alone. They had the strength of their community and the wisdom of their ancestors to guide them. As the sun rose the next morning, casting its golden rays over the village, the villagers set about their task with newfound determination. They worked together to repair the damage that had been done, their efforts fueled by the hope that flickered in their hearts. Slowly but surely, their community began to heal, and the river flowed once more, carrying their whispers to the sky. The villagers had learned an important lesson. Sometimes the path to healing lies in the unexpected, and the answers you seek may come when you least expect them.